What's going on, guys? I want to welcome you to the meta deck report for August 2023. Today, I'll be breaking down the best possible decks that you can play in Marvel Snap, both on ladder and Conquest. Now, right now, Snap is in a constant state of balance changes, card releases, and drastic shifts to the best cards and decks in the game, which firmly puts this month as probably the most competitive we have seen since launch in terms of meta decks. And they're also extremely creative. Now today, guys, I have 23 different decks for this meta deck report. As you guys know, we'll go through each and every deck and highlight what the deck does well and how to pilot it. But if you want a more in-depth look, we do have videos on a good chunk of these, and on those, I'll touch on those a bit more briefly. Now, as always, guys, let's go ahead and start at the tip of the spear with our first deck, Silky Smooth. A deck that specializes in a common theme that you'll see amongst the top tier decks today, keeping your cards below 9 power susceptible to obviously Shang-Chi, the most played card in Marvel Snap. However, at the same time, it's going to be pushing the power to the absolute max, utilizing currently one of the best combos in the game. You're going to see today, Angela and Kitty Pryde. Just extremely flexible, and you can also change where you're going to go with your powered up cards. At the same time, we're going to combine that with pretty much every good statted card across Snap. Things like Jeff, Silk, Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, and of course Vision are all going to boost up Kraven here to just hilarious high numbers. Your opponent doesn't know exactly how high this Kraven is going to get. It's too late for them to destroy it, and altogether, it's probably my favorite deck in the game. It's not the easiest to pilot, but once you get it down, you're going to have a blast. I would imagine both Silky Smooth and our next deck, Boosted Patriot, are going to be likely targets by the devs in the next OTA balance patch. Now, Boosted Patriot boasts an awesome flexibility to its shell. It's going to be taking advantage of the recent buff of Forge and Absorbing Man, flooding the board with high-powered, boostable cards, and it finishes with a bang. It does have a bit of a skill cap to operate it to the fullest degree, and if you want a full guide on how to play it and the flexible options, you can check out the video in the top right corner or in the description down below. Moving on, we have Value Hawk as our next deck, and this is definitely just a good cards list pushed together for as much value as possible. You're going to see a common theme, a lot of the same cards in some of these decks because they're just truly at a very good place at the moment. Obviously, a lot of them being forecast cards. Now, this is going to focus on that ever so insane Stature and Black Bolt combo. Now, all of this, of course, is going to play even better with a well-curved Zabu. And as always, it's great because you get to disrupt the opponent with Korg, Rock Slide, boosting up your Darkhawk. And then I even think the deck got a little bit better with the new addition of Silver Samurai. I think he's a bit better than Black Bolt in what he does and the value and curve that he brings. Now, our next two decks, guys, are going to be probably the best to multitask and win while playing Snap. Very straightforward, very easy to win, and I still think they're a little underplayed. Although they're both susceptible to Shang-Chi, they're both focused on Vision and Shuri, creating insanely tall power pushes into lanes with a good amount of flexibility. The first Shuri deck is the Sauron version. Of course, you know by now, just good at pumping out immense level of power. And of course, if you get Sauron, it's just an easy snap condition. Of course, trying to build up as much possible power in one lane, whether that's armor or Cosmo protecting it. And then the good old Shuri, Red Skull, Typhoid Vision, one of those three into the double power effect with Taskmaster at play. That one extra power to Vision, it just skyrocketed his playability with Shuri. Again, you can go ahead and dodge Shang-Chi. You can move him to a lane that needs help or maybe was closed down. Vision is just in a good spot at the moment, which is going to take us to the other Shuri deck in Vision Slam. Now, this one focuses on that Kitty Pryde Angela combo, and it's going to be somewhat the same, but of course, we don't have the Zero package. We're going to be relying on other just good value cards. You can be cheeky and play things that aren't just the Shuri line and still have a lot of dependable power. And then Kitty Pryde being a huge option you can throw into Shuri as well is one of the reasons people pick this deck over the Zero build. Both of these are insanely underplayed at the moment, with the only large con again being susceptible to Shang-Chi. Now, moving right along, guys, we have probably the biggest sleeper deck this season in Magneto Control. A deck built on a perfect blend of countering mixed with reliable power and some trickery, and its sole focus is just utilizing one of, if not the best overall card right now in Snap, and this meta, Magneto. The simple fact is, a lot of the decks that we break down today and that you've already seen rely heavy on 3 and 4 cost cards. Venom, of course, and Darkhawk. You can move these things and throw them off massively, and this deck is going to give you ample power. alongside that control that you can build up on a card like Kraven. Now, of course, the month is August, which we know this season has been deemed Destroy season, both in terms of card releases, the theme of the season, and of course, meta play. Right now, guys, we've got a lot of Destroy decks that are performing at a high level with a good amount of flexibility, and obviously the recent release of X-23 has kind of skyrocketed the way they perform. You don't have to have her in these decks, but it is going to make them a bit more consistent. Now, Nimrod Destroy will be the first one we cover. I think it's still very good. You can definitely trick your opponent in what you're going to do because you have a wide range of win conditions, and it's pretty straightforward to play for the person who is piloting the deck. However, it's not even close. Death X is currently my favorite Destroy archetype build at the moment. In my opinion, this is probably one of the best decks currently, and it's only going to get better the more we move away from this Destroy season. I've got a whole in-depth look on how to pilot the deck, the way it works, the combos, all that good jazz. Again, you can check that down in the description below. Now, if you've been playing Snap this month or even some of last, odds are you've ran into Legion a ton. He's one of the best cards to slot into so many different decks, and he straight up can ruin the next deck we're about to talk about. But if they don't have him, this deck is probably one of the better to play at the moment, and that is going to be our classic turn 7 deck in Shenaut. Now, outside of the whole limbo change, this thing is a beast. I mean, just skipping turn 6, slamming down Infinite and She-Hulk means two things. First, you usually don't take priority, so they can't Shang-Chi your big cards, and the huge power swing that you have on turn 7 is so tough to match by a lot of decks that usually, if you're not playing a heavy combo deck, you're going to pull out a big cube win. Fantastic deck, and it's very free-to-play friendly. Next up, let's talk High Evolutionary. Now, it's crazy to think that just with a few changes in Wasp and Hulk, this deck really has been kind of left to the wayside by a lot of players, but there are so many builds, and the deck is still very good at what it does. If it has been a while since you visited a High Evo deck, go ahead and check out one of the builds that you're seeing on screen now. Again, Lockjaw High Evo is in a great place. Control High Evo, just classic hazmat. Pushing out power is also solid. The Thing just got a recent adjustment, which makes the Abomination play a bit better as far as discounting goes, and combining that with a massive Hulk play. Love the deck. I still think it's much better than people give it credit for, but it has kind of gone down a little bit as that top tier option that it once was. All right, so that covers some of the huge big builds that you're going to see a lot right now competitive in the meta. But like I said at the beginning of the video, there are so many different decks that are working, and so we're going to kind of rapid fire through a ton of decks here, most of which that I have videos on if you want to get more in depth on them. These will be like the spark notes, if you will. Now, guys, I've got a new challenge, all right? Thanks to y'all, we're now over 100K subs. This is the biggest Marvel Snap channel, except for one. The official Marvel Snap channel is at 135K subs, and I have a new mission to beat it. So if you guys want to go ahead and subscribe down below if you enjoy the content, that's the new goal. I thought it would be kind of fun to take the throne from the official channel. And again, appreciate you guys for hanging out here. Let's go ahead and jump into the rapid fire. We start with Control Zoo, guys. A very strong deck full of 1-drops. And you're going to have Jean Grey to control combo decks, destroy decks, and other decks where your opponents are trying to spread their cards out. Now combine this with Professor X to cheat a lane, win the other lane with Valkyrie and ongoing cards. Insanely fun to play, surprisingly consistent, and go ahead and check out this video for more. Now, while we're on the topic of Zoo, pretty much since his launch, outside of maybe a month, Thanos has been in the meta deck report in some form or fashion, probably being one of the best to play that he's ever been. Now, he has multiple deck builds depending on the flavor and archetype that you enjoy, and he's definitely like the Conquest King. I would say Control Thanos, or maybe even Thanos Zoo. Hell, Destroy Thanos as well. These are all insanely powerful decks at the moment, and so feel free to kind of customize your build, just focusing on ramping out with time stones, getting out 5-cost drops, and just overwhelming your opponent with, well, control that the stones give you. Once you understand Thanos, you can kind of customize decks to your liking, and this video right here is kind of a masterclass on how to operate them. Now, of course, let's go from one big bad to the other. Galactus has been a silent, well, not silent, he's been played by like a billion people lately, but a very good deck at the moment that feels good. You have a lot of decks that can compete with that 7 power easily, but this Galactus deck has been really refreshing to play, and it's probably my favorite out there at the moment. I've got a huge guide on how to operate it, but the best part about Galactus is you can kind of make it your own, albeit outside of a couple of cards. Hell, there's even Orca decks floating out there, so if you want to check out Galactus, this is a good starting point. All right, so moving forward, guys, Silver Surfer is probably going to be on every meta deck report from here on out, just shifting the 3 drops to answer the current best decks in the meta at the current moment. And for now, I think this is probably the best Silver Surfer list. Not a lot has changed, but of course you have cards like Shadow King, things that just disrupt your opponent's big power. Destroy Season, these bounce decks with Kitty, Angela, rely on those boosted up stats, and so having Shadow King is huge. There is just so many different 3 drops that you can play, so there's a ton of flexibility. And comment down below if you guys want to see kind of a masterclass on Silver Surfer. I've been debating doing a massive guide on that, and so I want to hear from you guys down below. Now, we might as well shout out Negative Surfer as well. I would say this is probably a small bit worse than Sera Surfer, but albeit a lot more fun. People constantly just underestimate the power this can push out with Mr. Negative on the board. It's still a very well-played deck that is explosive, and ever since the Magic buff, if you haven't played it, go ahead and test it out. Now, speaking of Sera, of course, we will mention Sera Control, the deck that if you guys have been watching the channel, you've seen featured here a ton. Now, it is the kind of OG tried and true counter deck. At the moment, a lot of decks are avoiding Shang-Chi with these kind of below 9 power cards, so it's a bit harder to win purely off just countering other decks. But Enchantress is probably the MVP. A lot of top decks right now are just kind of acting like she doesn't exist. Still regarded as one of the more free-to-play favorites and a solid deck overall. Now, if you're just now coming back to Snap, you're probably looking at me like, why the hell do I have Hawkeye on the screen? That's because Hawkeye's actually not bad in our next deck, Hawkeye Bounce. Now, yes, bounce decks have kind of gone by the wayside. Not a lot of people are playing them at the moment. They're all about pushing out power, and honestly, it's tough to compete with a deck like Shuri in that regard. However, you can keep its power under that 9 slot for the Shang-Chi decks, and I think there's a lot of tech cards you can slot in here to make it perform at a very high level. A full deck guide can be found right here, and again, I'm going to say it, don't sleep on bounce. Let's go ahead and shift our focus, guys, to Discard, which I think at the moment is in a weird place. It's a very good archetype. I think personally the best deck is yet to be discovered. Silver Samurai just came out. It doesn't fit perfectly in Discard, but I think it's only a matter of days before that happens. But Daken, whatever floats your boat for his name, has definitely found a firm placement within the archetype, which brings us to the Daken Discard deck. Now, this is definitely going to be what you've seen of the reliable Discard MODOK builds, but Daken is going to provide a little bit better curve than cards like Storm that previously did take up his spot. The deck boasts a pretty good cube rate and win rate, albeit a little bit on the predictable side. But if you want just like a smooth and steady deck to Infinite or to Climb and Conquest, this is definitely one that I would look at if you do enjoy Discard. Now, speaking of Discard, of course, we got to talk about Hela, who surprisingly, it's insane. She is way better than she used to be. She's still Hela. She's not going to be the most reliable archetype on the planet. But this deck build in particular is pushing out some awesome numbers in terms of cube rates and maybe not overall consistency. But Hela does have a nice place now, somewhat of a home. If you need to escape like the sweaty decks, or if you just love chaos, go ahead and kick the tires on Hela. Definitely just a blast to play. Now, some of you probably forgot this card is in the game, but yes, we have a competitive Ronan deck that boasts a 58% win rate, good cube rate, and it's called Ronan Rocks. Now, obviously, a little bit of a shell on the Rocks and Hawks deck. Guys, I think this deck has plenty of room for improvement, but already it's performing at a pretty nice high level. Now, breaking down the deck, you see that we don't have any cards that are going to hurt any of our other main win conditions. Previously, Maximus always found his way in a Ronan deck, but having Darkhawk and Ronan as the primary power factors alongside Mystique and Iron Lad is how this deck is becoming so consistent. Master Mold finally has a place that doesn't feel awkward, and then of course Zabu allows you to flood with 4-cost cards that help amp the deck in overall power. Ronan believers, Master Mold lovers, this is going to be the deck for you if you enjoy the archetype. Of course, speaking of which, Rocks and Hawks itself is still reliable. The Devil Dinosaur deck to play for the most part. Still enjoying it myself, and there is more flexibility than there was in the past. This is one that I'm about to update with an upgraded model on the build, but your traditional Rocks and Hawks still very solid. Now, to round things off, we have 2 other decks. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., our Nick Fury deck that has not been forgotten and is going to give you the most variety and variance of play to keep your opponents on their feet, and is one of my favorite Conquest decks because of that. Agent Coulson, obviously Nick Fury, all discounted with Quinjet. just never gets old, and then you have more reliable ways to push out power. Now, fun fact, this is actually the deck that I have the most Infinity Conquest wins with, just because I fell in love with the playstyle, and I think it's one of the most fun to play. And guys, for our last deck, I thought maybe you would never see the day. We have Cerebro on the list, and it's not Cerebro 2. No, it's not Cerebro 3. Freaking Cerebro 5, baby, is your new best Cerebro deck. In fact, this deck is only a few more cards away from being super competitive in Marvel Snap. There's a lot of cards that synergize with one another. They make a lot of sense. And overall, here is the deck shell. Now, live by Cerebro, die by Cerebro. If OTA patches come, obviously some of these cards are going to fall off. And naturally, personally, I actually expect like Captain Marvel to get maybe a little bit of a touch-up, and or some of these other 5-cost cards. You do have to be flexible in what to play. But either way, I'm telling you, this deck does slap. Cerebro 5 is going to benefit most from just kind of like having it all. First of all, you have 5 power, which is just good outside of Cerebro 2 if they do counter your deck. But you have surprising moves like Miles Morales. You can counter with Stegron or Enchantress. Obviously, Captain Marvel's here. Omega Red to have a surprise finish. Spider-Man, Polaris. A lot of great meta cards at the 5 power slot. And I think this is going to be the build moving forward for Cerebro fans. Overall, just a freaking crazy month for Marvel Snap in terms of the meta and all of these decks. I think as we age in Marvel Snap coming up on a year, the decks are becoming more creative than ever. And then we're going to be entering the Loki season, which is going to be insane in terms of new cards and archetypes that will form from that. You can find down in the comments below all of the deck codes from today's deck, and I'm going to have all these graphics available to those that help support the channel. Becoming a YouTube member helps a ton. It allows me to do this day after day. Again, guys, we're trying to beat Marvel Snap's official channel, so if you guys do enjoy the content and you come back time and time again, be sure to subscribe down below. Only takes a second, maybe 2 if you're slow. But anyway, guys, hopefully you enjoyed today's video, and until the next one, happy snapping.